All right, I'm going to quickly talk about this. I am not what I would call a livestock expert by any stretch of the imagination. However, I do work with renewable fuels customers, so if you have questions on that, I can help to answer out. But this is just board cattle crush and board hog crush. Just wanted to show that cattle margins currently below break even. Hog margins actually near some of the record levels we've seen since 2005, 2006. What's interesting is despite those low margins, and if you kind of look back, in cattle, the top chart, over a period of time, you've definitely had poorer margins more than you've had good margins, at least since 2007. Despite that, this year's cattle on feed numbers are actually near record large. So despite the poor margins, we're actually putting more animals on feed. But what's really weird about that is when you look at this chart, and then look at this chart. This is U.S. corn feed use. And we're at record levels of animal units, and we're at the smallest feeding for corn since back in '91. Down 193 million bushels from a year ago. And obviously you can see it peaked out in 2006, about when the DDGs really started to make their way into rations very aggressively. But a lot of that also, in the last 2 years, has probably been a little bit of feed, wheat working into some rations there as well. Bottom line, I don't know, even if we weren't rationing demand, you can see in 2009 we were just above 5 billion bushels. I don't know that we can get back to that 6 billion bushel mark. The feed sector is shrinking as the DDGs become more available. So that's what your feed chart looks like currently. Shift gears out of cattle and into renewable fuels. This is what spot ethanol crush margins look like. The last charts I showed on cattle and hogs were board crush. This is actual numbers. These are actually probably margins that plants in Iowa are realizing today. At the end of December of this year, we lost the blender's credit, which was 45 cents a gallon. Up to that point, from October through December, we had some of the best ethanol demand we've ever seen because the blenders were just buying as much gallons as they could to blend it, get the credit, and move it into demand base. Margins for most plants we work with enjoyed their best 3-month margin period in their history. So you can see in Deese, we actually had the best margin point along this entire 4-year chart. What happened afterwards, while somewhat expected, was far more drastic than anybody really expected at that point. We went from record high to record low in a matter of 3 weeks. And this is the current situation of the ethanol production levels. They are looking at negative margins today, all the way out through about August and September of next year, or this year actually. So you can see it's definitely been a change. This VTEC expiration was widely expected. It was certainly something that people in the last 6 months had expected to happen. But you can see the kind of impact it's had on margins currently. This doesn't have the latest December numbers in it, but once we see December numbers, we should see record production. Plants were producing as quick as they could to get the gallons and realize those good margins we saw in December. But you can see what started to happen. Look at the trend. Has definitely started to level off a little bit here. Now this is the chart that I say is a takeaway. We've got 2004 through 2011 actual ethanol production levels, and the gray charts for 2012 through 2015 show the expected RFS going through 2015. In other words, that's the mandated volume levels. What I want to point out is the black line on the top actually shows where the current operating capacity is. As you can see, we don't have a lot of new capacity coming online. What we do have is we're already producing about where corn-based ethanol is going to top out in 2015 at that 15 billion gallon level. So we've enjoyed 300 to 500 million bushel increases in demand per year since about 2006. That 5-year period was a very aggressive loadout of ethanol production ramp up, and it's done. That was it. We are now there. We're so grateful it's there. It's changed, it's revolutionized the farm industry, but it's not going to be there year after year going forward. And that's not saying we're going back to $2 corn by any means. It's there, it's going to stay. They've got, they're going to keep producing, they've got an RFS to make, but it probably says you don't have to carry a premium to keep buying acres, to keep incentivizing producers to plant corn because we've got new demand coming at us every year after this. So that's the point I want to really make, is that currently, we're at about 15 billion gallons a year annualized capacity. What's interesting is that you can see, where we are in 2011 production. We exported about 1 billion gallons this year to other countries, including Brazil. So that's kind of the situation right now. It's just a different one that we've seen in the last 5, 6, 7 years. We're at that point where we finally have absorbed the full hit of ethanol production. So I want to talk a little bit about the export market. Currently projected to be near about 8-year lows, and you can see, for the most part, down below last year, but nothing that's astronomically changed in there. What's interesting is that despite the cuts, this chart shows where current, like last Thursday's export sales pace is versus its projected total. In other words, this date and time today, we've sold 61% of the projected USDA total forecast for this year, which is actually the 3rd highest that I've got history for. So you can see we've actually had a pretty good export pace this year, despite the low projections the USDA is going to be using now. And that's one of the reasons why the USDA actually raised up their export forecast about 50 million bushels in this January crop report. Now, this to me is one of the neatest charts that I've seen that really shows how prices affect demand, especially a year when we've got foreign competition of feed wheat. What I'm charting here is in the darker blue line, corn prices, and in the lighter blue line, that weekly export sales pace, that export sales number. So this is week 1, in other words, last September, and week 19 was last Thursday. Look at what started to happen. As prices were high, sounds hard to imagine, back in September, $7.50 a bushel.